Welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Roger Humphrey. In this episode, I'm pleased to welcome award-winning classical guitarist Nicholas Goluses. Please join us as we discuss his teaching program at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York, his experiences with the great maestro Andres Segovia, his approach to interpreting music, and much, much more. But before we get started, please take a moment and reach down there and click on the subscribe or follow button. It's a little thing, but it really helps out the channel, and I would appreciate it a lot. Thank you. So I want to welcome Nicholas Goluses to the program. Thanks, Nick, for joining me. I really appreciate this a lot.
Morning, Roger. My pleasure to be here. It's great to see you again.
So I have enough stuff to talk about. I could probably talk all day, but I won't do that to you.
So I'm fine with whatever you want to talk about.
Thank you. You started the program in Eastman. You've been at Eastman since '93, is that right?
Yeah.
So now how that I'm assuming has grown quite a bit since then?
Yeah, so I was teaching at Manhattan School of Music. I did I was there as a student for many years, and after I graduated, I was asked to chair the guitar department, and the program grew really well. We had Segovia at the end of his life giving master classes, and it was a real juggernaut. I loved it. I had no intention of leaving, and I love New York. But Eastman then decided they were going to open up a guitar program, and I had heard about this place for many, many years and knew people from here, and so I came up and took the audition and was happy that they offered me the job, and I fell in love with the place and the people up here. So I decided, I had 2 small children at the time, and thought maybe it was a good idea to leave New York and move up to Rochester. And it's just been a great joy, really, in every way. People are wonderful, great music making, hardworking students. It's been a pleasure. So since '93, I've had a good run here and still enjoying it, going strong. And the students are, they're the reasons why it's so terrific.
Well, congratulations to that. Now, how big of a studio do you have?
Right now, my load is 18. It's been a little higher in the past. When I was first hired here, they wanted me to be at around 22, and that was great. But at this point in my life, I'm performing a lot more, and so they've enabled me to stay at full time, but only be 18, which is good. I have a lot of doctoral students, so they do all the extra teaching for me, which is guitar history and lit, guitar pedagogy, fretboard harmony, chamber music, those kinds of things, and it's good for them to get teaching experience. So for me, it's teaching 18 majors every week, and a good mix of doctoral masters and undergrads, and really from all over the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Good studio.
I, of course, had an opportunity to hear one of your students recently, and another one of your students is a good friend of mine, Brad DeRoche. So.
Well, you heard that one the other day because of your generosity. You were so kind to donate a great instrument to my studio that's been constantly in use. And I think you heard Gerardo Miranda from
Yes.
Puerto Rico playing it. And he loves that guitar. It's a great Brian Cohen instrument, for which we're grateful to you.
Well, you're very welcome. So your performance now, you said you're performing more. What kind of a concert schedule you're keeping right now?
About 25 concerts a year, mostly solo and chamber works, a few concerti every year. But mostly it's, when I saw you up in Lansing recently, I was doing a concert with Bonita Boyd. She's the flute professor here. And we have another concert coming up in South Carolina in a couple of weeks. So I do, a bunch of things with her. Solo concerts are generally what guitarists do the most, and that's true for me as well. I'm playing next week in Kentucky. I've got a solo recital down there. Then out to California. Concerti are always a blast. I love playing with orchestra as long as we can get the amplification right. Recently, I premiered a new concerto by Stephen Goss, which is a great new piece for guitar and wind orchestra.
He's a wonderful composer.
Really great. And this piece is sensational. A pleasure to play. Difficult, but worth it. And difficult for the orchestra. That's been fun. But like most guitarists, I play a lot of the repertoire that was written for the guitar in the middle of the 20th century. I just played the Fantasia of Rodrigo down in Colombia, near Bogota, a little town called Ibagué, where I had a Fulbright. And I've done, Ponce and Aranjuez and the ones that most of us are asked to do. But little by little, it's getting better than just Aranjuez. It's more and more starting to branch out for concerti. But still, for guitar, not as much as for a pianist or a violinist.
Yeah, well, we have a kind of a big hole. We kind of went for, decades without any substantial pieces being written for us. And so kind of making up for it now, I think. I read somewhere that there's more new music being written and recorded and performed for guitar than any other instrument. I don't know if that's true, but I read that somewhere.
That's but when I heard you starting to say that sentence, the first part of it was more and more music being written and performed for guitar, and I didn't expect to hear the last couple of words for any other instrument. But I will say about the guitar, everything is more. There's more players, there's more builders, there's more composers, there's more thought to pedagogy, everything is just more. The instrument is not only just flourishing. I would say that it's rocketing forward in every way, and such a pleasure to be around it.
You took the time when you were in Lansing to spend a little time with a former student of mine, Rick Overly, and I look at him and I think, in another lifetime, that would have been professional chops. He's a very good player. And,
Yes.
And the amateurs that are out there right now are really terrific. I'm running into them, or I did. I don't as much anymore, but it was always a surprise and to be tickled to run into somebody say, "Well, I play a little guitar," and then they start and they start playing even the Boree or something like that, which those were professional chops 40 years ago, and these are people that work in offices and or drive truck or something.
Well, it's the best thing, because they not only they not only keep the level of enthusiasm up for everybody, but they create an audience. And my father once told me it takes two people to have a conversation. One has to talk, the other has to listen. Without a good listener, you can talk until you're blue in the face, and it's meaningless. So we're happy to have everyone interested in the guitar in every way.
The other thing that I remember a quote from Horowitz, because he took some criticism occasionally for playing some of the smaller, more trite pieces that you and I would consider kind of trite, and the more obvious pieces. And he said, you have to understand. He said anywhere upwards to half of the people in the audience are not there because they want to be there. They're there because somebody brought them. And he says, and they deserve to get their money's worth too. And so he always tried to make it a point to put one or two songs in his programs that would satisfy the people that didn't know anything about classical music. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. You look across the room and realize that there's a significant, or could be a significant number of people there who really would rather be someplace else.
Well, I remember when I was a student in New York. This was in 1980, and there was a raffle to win 2 tickets to see Horowitz at Avery Fisher Hall. I think they call it David Geffen Hall now. And being a music student, I didn't have any money, but I won 2 tickets. It was great. So I got to go see Horowitz in 1980, and that was the night that the American and Soviet Union hockey teams were playing in the finals at the Olympics. And so Horowitz, who played, this massive Rachmaninoff sonata in the first half, in between movements, he would tell people the score. And in the second half, he was playing a bunch of lovely little vignettes, just as you said, these lovely little, songs without words and just romantic works that just had the most, delicacy. And in between each one, he would say, okay, now the score, it was just great. And the audience would just erupt because it was that great story about how the American team won.
I saw the Assad brothers with Nigel Salerno Sonnenberg when they were on tour as a trio, and it was wonderful. Of course, she's a marvel anyway, as are they.
They are.
But she's also just a boatload of personality. She's someone I'd like to just hang out with, just to shoot the breeze. And but the concert that I saw was the evening of the Super Bowl.
Oh.
And so when they came back for the second half of the program after intermission, she came out and announced the score to everybody, which I thought was really charming.
Yeah, I just like that. It's nice. Well, that's the part of when you're on stage. It's really important to realize that there are people out there, and they have lives, and they have interests, and they have, you're creating something that contributes to their lives, but there's more to their lives than what they're seeing you do. I mean, you want to do a good job, and you want to play well, and they deserve a professional performance,
Yes.
but there's more going on in their head, and it's nice to be able to tap into that from the stage.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, I know that you were a friend of Segovia's, and you studied with him, I believe, correct? What kind of influence was that on you at that time?
Well, I first met him. I mean, for me to say he was my friend, I've got a couple of pictures of us back there that I can show you. But more importantly, I wouldn't say that. It's a little presumptuous for me to even say that he was my friend, but I did love him, and he was very warm toward me. In 1982, I first met him I played in a master class for him at Grace Rainey Rogers Auditorium at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I played Bach. I was working on the violin sonatas at the time. And at that point in Segovia's life, in his teaching, people weren't bringing Bach to him. They were bringing other things, mostly music written for him by, Moreno Torroba, Castelnuovo Tedesco, Rodrigo, Villalobos, all those, great composers and, great repertoire. But people were not bringing Bach to him because I think that he had, I don't know, I guess people maybe thought that his way of playing Bach was a little bit had grown out of fashion. It bothered him. He never said it. But I showed up playing the third violin sonata. So I auditioned and got selected for the class. And then he started calling me, he didn't know my name. He started calling me that Bach boy. And so so then the class happened, and Hugh Downs was there with 2020 because Hugh Downs was a big fan of Segovia.
I remember seeing that special.
Did you see that where he was? They were in the house of Ramirez, and they were choosing a guitar for Hugh Downs.
Yes, I recall all of that. Yes,
it was great.
Yeah, it was a wonderful program. I sit there just salivated as I was watching this.
Yeah, there was a bit where they showed Segovia and his wife. They're donating the 37 Hauser and the 1912 Ramirez to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and and I was there. I went to that as well. That was great. But so fast forward to several years later, I was chair at Manhattan, and I through Rose Augustine, I got a message to him, would he come and give master classes? And he said yes, and so we agreed that he would do 2 classes at Manhattan for my students, and then 1 class at Carnegie Recital Hall, which now is called Weill Hall, for anyone who wanted to audition. And it was an incredible experience and then we gave him an honorary doctorate at Manhattan School. And I got Boutros Ghali to come and give from the, Secretary General of the UN to come and give the commencement address. And it was an amazing time. And, I wanted to get airline tickets. He was living in Switzerland. So I called Swiss Air, sure, 3 seats, 1 for the guitar, 1 for him, 1 for Emily, to all first class, donated. Wow. Westbury Hotel, a suite for the week. Donated. I mean, that was Segovia. He was so much larger than anything. And all you had to do was open up the window and yelled Segovia, and everything comes rolling. It was unbelievable. And I fortunately got to play during that time, I went to his hotel room he asked me what I was working on, and I told him, and he said, well, okay, come and play at 3 o'clock. And so I would show up several days and play through things, and he took that, he had a vision of beauty and a sound that he took to the grave. I mean, it was very unique, very special. And he gave his whole life to the guitar.
I was talking to somebody not too long ago about Segovia, and I said, I'd heard people say that his style was maybe out of fashion, and people kind of nitpick at him. Of course, he was on such a pedestal when he was alive, so people immediately started throwing stones at that pedestal 5 minutes after he'd passed, which is unfortunate. Um, but recently, I mean, one of my things that I do in the evening, but for about a half an hour, 45 minutes before I go to bed at night, is that's when I go on YouTube and I listen to music or watch artists just for fun. And my tastes vary; they're all over the map. But it's been fun to watch a lot of the new emerging players come up and make their videos and all that kind of stuff. But I hear some of the standard repertoire, and I remember the probably Recuerdos and Leyenda, both kind of in that, where everybody's doing them kind of thing. And honestly, I'll listen for a minute and then I check out and go to something else. And one evening, on the feed, Segovia popped up playing a Leyenda, Asturias. So I'll take a listen for a second. And the next thing I knew, it was over. He had just absolutely sucked me in. I was, this piece, I've played it a million times myself and performed it. I have, I've taught it. I listened to all of these these new people come up playing it better than I ever did. And artistically, just couldn't hold me. Amazing chops, great hands, but no heart, no soul. It's just all notes, no music. And listen to Segovia, and you forget the technique. You forget what it takes to play that, and you just get drawn into the absolute beauty of the piece. I've always that just amazes me.
Well, that was Segovia, and he would do that in front of huge audiences, and he would just draw them all in. And there was a recording technology was not the best when Segovia was recording, except there were a couple of LPs that were made toward the end of his life, not the really late ones, but the ones right in the middle where he recorded like the Manen Sonata and a few other things where the Hauser was still in his hands, and the technology had reached a level of excellence that when you hear it, you hear what freaked out everybody, the colors and the fact that the guitar was, for many of us, the guitar is like a piano. But for Segovia, the guitar was a stringed instrument. And sometimes it was a guitar too. I mean, it was always a combination of those three elements. And you can hear the thing that he knew how to do to draw people in as a guitarist, and then beyond that as a musician. It was remarkable.
I always equated him with Casals, basically the same generation.
Yep.
And I always thought that Segovia really kind of, I don't want to say emulated, but I think he kind of took some inspiration maybe from Pablo Casals. And so that's what I always hear. And I've told people that for years, that so many people play the guitars over a piano, and Segovia just, there was something very orchestral about what he did, and very not pianistic. I mean, the notes were clear, but it was very very cello-like, and his voicing and the way he phrased things, it just seemed to be very cello-like.
Well, it's because he went along the string. And because like a singer goes up and down when singers are working on intonation, they actually use their hand like this. And so Segovia was going along the string, Casals also up the string. And then there was this element of vibrato that was an expressive tool, and it was always different. I mean, it wasn't that it was just on and off. It was how much vibrato and how much do you change the pitch and how fast do you vibrate. And that's the parallels between Segovia and Casals are real, and you're right on the money there, Roger.
Yeah, and even to me, even the way he approached a chord, because on a piano, of course, just drop your fingers on the keys, and so all the notes are played at the same time. On a cello, you can't do that. You got to drag that bow across, or violin, and so his chords are always arpeggiated.
For me, I feel as though, because I was around when the backlash against Segovia happened, and that happened in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was a real backlash. And now I feel like the pendulum is really, among everybody, we're swinging back. So we're really embracing the precision that became wonderful in the 80s for guitar and the 90s. And now we're also, you hear players bringing back the very things you're talking about from Segovia. I feel like the whole thing is become a lot more robust because we have that level of precision, but we also now are starting to pay attention to things like sound.
Yeah, I think that was the thing I've always appreciated about your guitar playing was your tone. Is just, I mean, I would die to have that tone. But it takes hard work, and I'm kind of a lazy guy. So
Well, I doubt that, but I do know that when I first played in that master class I told you about some years ago, a friend of mine was playing, very well-known guitarist, and he was playing Rodrigo Fandango. And Segovia was telling him, your sound is kind of thin. You might want to work on your nails. I mean, it was and so Segovia demonstrated on his guitar. And my friend looked at him, and Segovia knew what he was thinking. Well, if I had a guitar like that, I could sound like that too. And Segovia knew he was thinking that. So he walks around behind him, puts his arm over my friend and put his hand on the strings and went boom and made the same sound on his guitar. It was very humbling. Oh, here. Yeah, in here. I mean, with Segovia, it all starts like a pianist back here, the stroke. And your large muscle supports small muscles. Point of contact is important. Follow through and relaxation are important. And moving the string in a certain way and having the nails just right.
So yeah, that's always been my downfall. My nails are terrible, terribly poorly shaped, and I've just done. I get the best sound I can with what I've got, but that's about it. So. Well,
I'm glad, and I'm glad to see the guitar behind you there.
Oh yeah, this is my workhorse. I have actually three guitars. The other two are in the closet behind me. I have a Kono that I actually bought from Mr. Kono. I was living in Tokyo at the time, and I didn't know anything about. All I knew about guitar was strumming and singing, and I started getting interested in classical guitar. And there was a music shop, a small music shop. The whole store I don't think was much bigger than this room, and this little lady that ran it. So I told her I kind of had my eye on this top of the line Yamaha that I'd heard that I really thought was lovely. And she said, if you're going to spend that kind of money, get a Kono. I don't know what a Kono was. So she set up an appointment. He came in. We chatted briefly, and then a few months later, I took possession of this Model 10. This is 1971, early 1971 that I bought it, and it's still a beautiful instrument. So I don't play it as often anymore because I'm old and my hands don't do this as well, and it's a big scaled instrument. It's a beast.
Right. But I'm a big fan of Kono. I think that they had an amazing quality. A lot of them were like flautas, but they are big. I mean, at that time, I think that he was building 664 scales like the Ramirez scale, and I think that over time it got a little bit more like 650. But they're very good guitars, and I've played one or two that were really exceptional. So I'm glad you're having a Kono. They're great. Kono was great.
They're wonderful. And the thing is that I think they're terribly undervalued. You could buy them all day long for comparatively very little money.
Yeah.
And so I think they're a great choice for students. And this is a Japanese copy of a Ramirez 1A. But it's really nice. I mean, the wood it's built in '84. And so I've had it, since then. I bought it new, and I play more gigs than I do concerts and things like that. So, and a lot of outdoor stuff. So the lacquer top is really kind of important. It'll stand up to the elements much better. And
well, Japan, they're a very, very, very important place for the guitar. I taught for a few summers in Hamamatsu. I met a lot of guitarists in Japan. I've had a few students from there, but I got to be there for a few summers. the level of guitar enthusiasm through Gendai guitar and through great players is pretty off the charts, and they're a joy to be around, and they're not afraid to spend a few bucks when it comes to buying instruments, building concert halls, commissioning composers. There's a real real love for guitar there.
Yeah, they take these things to heart. So.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you also real quick, like about the new music, because you've premiered a lot of work. You've had a lot of pieces written for you. What's your approach to a piece of music? I mean, if you're listening, if you're working on a Bach piece, for example, you've got multiple influences, whether you accept them or not, but they're available to you to listen to, and from the old recordings up to things that were done yesterday. But with new music, it's all you and the composer, I think.
You know, it's funny that you should mention Bach when you ask me a question about new music. And the reason why I appreciate that is because when you play a piece of music of Bach, let's say a piece written for the cello, you have to make a transcription of it. You know, Bach wouldn't have expected you to play just what he wrote for the cello. He would have expected you to do things like he would have done when he arranged music for bowed instruments to plucked. You have to make a transcription. Sometimes it's the key, sometimes it's adding notes, sometimes it's ornamentation. Well, when you get a piece from a composer, it's often the same thing. Unless they're a guitarist, you kind of have to make a transcription of it, because most composers don't know how to write for the guitar. The instrument is very temperamental, and writing for the guitar, as you know, it's not always a great success. Sometimes it has no soul whatsoever, or resonance, or things don't work. The minute you write a minor second, which composers love that interval, your fingers are looking like, they're that far apart, that there's not a whole lot else you can do here. I mean, there's so many things that composers don't know when it comes to writing for the guitar. So it's nice if you can work with them. And I would say that most composers are open to changes in voicings if you need for that to happen, as you're making your transcription of their new piece. Sometimes they go out. I just got a piece by a great composer named Bill Dobbins, who just, he went out and he got himself a guitar, and he was making sure that things, he had a fingerboard chart. Apparently Britten did that for Nocturnal as well. So a lot of composers make the effort to figure out if it's going to fit, but a lot of them just don't. They just write a piece like it's for left-hand piano, which is fine, and then we have to make it work. Sometimes the composer is open to changes. Sometimes they say things like, well, maybe if you practice a little bit more, you'll be able to do it the way I wrote it. You never know what they're going to say. But ultimately, you have to do a good job. And music has two births. The first when the composer writes it, the second when we play it. So first of all, I try to figure out what's going on with the music. I try to figure out where the highs and the lows are, try to figure out what the musical language is saying, and try to figure out how to make it sound well on the guitar, because it has to sound well. And then I often, if the composer is available, I go and play it for them, preferably in person, and get some feedback from them, and that helps a lot. If they're not available, if it's a new piece that hasn't been played before, then you just have to give it your best shot. But if it's a piece that, like, let's say you like Bream repertoire, Walton, Britten, Maxwell Davies, Takamitsu, Brouwer. Oh my gosh, I know I'm missing out a lot. Lennox Barkley. I mean, the great works written for Bream. Well, you have to listen to what he did, because Bream is our connection to that composer. If there is no connection like that, and you can't access the composer, all you have is the score. You have to try to do your best to try to make it sound well.
Try to find the music within the notes. I guess for me, that would be the way I would look at it.
Yes. You have to make it work. I mean, the score is going to tell you if it's well-written piece. It'll tell you. It's a roadmap. But music doesn't exist on paper, so you have to figure out a way to make it sound well. And sometimes you just have to use your best artistic judgment.
Well, my approach with my students has always been to teach them to look at a piece of sheet music like you would look at a blueprint for a house. It is not a photograph of the house. It is just simply the bones. It's up to you to paint the walls and to place the furniture and things like that.
That's a wonderful analogy. It's exactly like that. It's a blueprint. You're right. That's exactly what it is. It's not the house.
Thanks.
Yep. I love that. I'm going to steal that for sure.
You are more than welcome. I am honored.
Thank you.
So, I have taken up so much of your time already this morning. I could probably do this again, like I said, for the rest of the day, but I am going to say goodbye to you and thank you so much for being on the program and, taking the time to do this. I'm trying to, there we go.
Pleasure is mine, Roger. It's a joy to see you again, and it was great to see you recently and continued success with this wonderful program. And thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be part of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again real soon on another episode of Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.